All right, so the great thing about sending live is, of course, that technical issues, they happen. And the interesting part about this is that we actually have a moderator who can't get in to our system due to maybe a firewall at OECD. So I'm taking over here, and I'm happy to see that we have other participants joining in. So I'm really happy to see that we have other people able to join. I will try to do as best as I can to moderate our session here, standing in for Tyler Gillard from OECD. But maybe he'll just pop in throughout the course of the session. But really, I would love to be able to hand over and basically handing over to Janet Mensink from SLCP to get us started. So over to you, Janet.
Thank you, Jonas, and thanks for jumping in. It always happens with meetings. So thanks also to the full GFA for providing us an opportunity to speak here. And when I was asked to present here, and last weekend when I was preparing for this session, one of the things that crossed my mind was, really? We're in 2021, and on the one hand, we are talking about Industry 4.0, and on the other hand, we're still talking about compliance with even the basic human rights as a key priority on the fashion CEO agenda. And yeah, to put that in perspective, we've been talking about this in the global fashion supply chains for more than 25 years now. And yet we still see the pictures in the news of young garment workers who hardly earn enough to feed their families. And we hear the stories about the most unsafe workplaces and fatal accidents. Plus, of course, the impact of the pandemic, which left countless workers without any livelihood at all. But the good news is, at least I feel, that there is change finally happening. And I think that is because of a number of factors. And one of them definitely being that governments and policymakers are definitely part of the debate now. And also we have an opportunity to use and get credible and actionable data that will help also drive the change. So if I elaborate a bit more on those. In the past decades, we've seen many social compliance programs, mostly led by the private sector or the NGOs. These initiatives have had some progress, but also recent research shows that there's too little improvement on just the core labor standards, such as working hours, wages, and health and safety. Also, more recently, the UN guiding principles and other frameworks have made us increasingly aware of the role of different stakeholders, particularly governments across the globe. For one side, on the protection of their citizens in workplace situations, but also, on the other hand, to guide multinationals in their value chain policy. And if I would like to clarify both points a little bit more. So to achieve lasting improvements on working conditions in the fashion supply chain, I feel, and we feel, it is essential to enable and enforce solid labor laws by strengthening local government ownership. Secondly, to achieve lasting improvements, governments or intergovernmental organizations should guide multinationals to implement human rights due diligence in value chain, such as what the European Commission is currently proposing. In both these cases, policymakers, just like brands and manufacturers, need credible, comparable, and actionable verified data. We believe SLCP, the Social Labor Convergence Program, and their partners can deliver those. The rapid increasing support for and the adoption of our converged assessment framework is promising. SLCP is a multi-stakeholder initiative to reduce audit fatigue and reallocate resources, from social audits towards improvement programs. Our program is supported by more than 200 signatories. Our converged assessment framework was jointly created in alignment with the OECD due diligence guidance. And now we are well on our way to become the #1 source of credible social data. We're scaling up quickly. Thousands of facilities in over 50 countries are using our tools. And also, more than 40 brands and standard holders have publicly accepted SLCP in place of their own social audits. We are collaborating with 2 UN agencies, ITC and ILO Better Work, but also with existing systems in this space like SAC's HIG, Fairware Foundation, and several others. Further scaling is expected in the next coming years. As mentioned, I feel we have reason to be cautiously optimistic. The urgency is definitely there. And let's aim that in 5 years' time from now, and not another 25 years, please, respectful work environments in fashion supply chains are a given, a license to operate. It really takes a different attitude from all of us to get there. It will require collaboration between private sector, civil society, and governments. And policymakers definitely have a role to play here. Please take this as an open invitation to discuss and collaborate. We at SLCP are keen to contribute our share to this. So thanks again to GFA for this opportunity and looking forward to the follow-up conversation.
Thanks so much, Janet, for your intervention. Further ado, while we're still fighting to get the technicalities right here and get Tyler in here, we will hand over quickly to Lucrecia Busa from Commissioner Reindeer's cabinet to give us an overview of what's happening within the Commission. The floor is yours, Lucrecia.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So I'm happy to be here as well, and thanks for the invitation. I'm happy to say a few words about the work that we are doing at the Commission. I should start, though, with 2 disclaimers. The first one is that what I expressed today is my views and do not bind the Commission or the Commissioner I work for. And then the second one is that we are still working on the initiative, so you would appreciate I will have not definitive answers, but rather I can point to the main points of reflection and main questions that we are dealing with. So we are working on a mandatory initiative that will comprise a mandatory due diligence duty. This will include for companies the obligation to put in their corporate governance some procedures and some tools that will enable companies to identify in their own operations and across the value chain the risks, possible risks of violations of human rights, of social rights, or of adverse impact on the environment. And there is also an obligation not only to identify, but also to mitigate these risks. Now, of course, due diligence is a context-specific exercise, and this means that what we will look at is that the steps that can be reasonably put in place in line with the OECD guidelines to identify and to mitigate these risks, taking into account also the context in which the companies operate, including their size, their economic power, etc., and the characteristics also of the situation in the country included in which they are active. As I was saying, the idea is to tackle a number of risks. Janet mentioned some of them, you know them very well, also in relation, for instance, to issues like forced labor, safe working conditions, etc. And also to look at impact on the environment, and sometimes also because very often the impact of the environment also has an impact on the way people live in Europe and outside of Europe, and in the way and on their human rights as well. This is the first component that will be applicable across all the different sectors, and we are thinking also about other possible initiatives of a sectorial application that could complement this first idea. The second component on which we are working concerns directors' duties and concerns the possibility to clarify the existing directors' duty of care vis-à-vis the companies in a way that when the directors do the company's interests, they look at the long-term interest of the company, and they also take into account the impact of the company's activities on the stakeholders, like the customers, the workers, and also on the environment. This would lead to them to better take into account risks also linked to the company's activities, and also to a better management of the risks. And we see these two components as strongly related, because the mandatory due diligence duty that, as I was saying, will be construed in line with the UN guiding principles and the OECD guidelines, this duty can be effective only if it's part of the strategy of the company. And it's important, if we want to this to be part of the strategy of the company, to involve the directors, who are the ones responsible for drawing the strategy and for implementing the strategy. And the reason why we are doing that, it's easy. It's because there is a demand of European society that the products and the services that we use in Europe are produced in line with our values and do not harm the environment, are in line also with the commitments that we are taking as a union, as a society, to protect the environment and the climate. And the idea is to associate the business sector, the private sector, in this effort to achieve these goals together with the public sector. Of course, the two things go together, and this is why this initiative, which is a company law initiative, is part of a bigger scheme of Commission initiatives that include also sustainable finance, but also look at the importance of the sustainable development goals in our trade relationships with the trade partners, and as well as in our development policy. And this also answers the call for action from the European Parliament, from the Council, in their December conclusions. They asked for the Commission to work on to improve working conditions in Europe and outside of Europe. And finally, also a call for citizens, from citizens, because we had a very high participation to our open public consultation, and we registered like 500,000 replies. And yeah, so that's where we are. This is, let's say, the main questions we are now have to deal with is how to best design the duty of due diligence, what is the scope, what are the enforcement mechanisms. We are looking at administrative enforcement, civil liability, and also how to best target this to the different kind of companies, having particularly in mind the situation of small and medium enterprises. So that's all I can say, and I'm happy to take questions.
Amazing, thank you, Lucretia. I'm sure there will be specific questions on that, and also the closing remark also being a cliffhanger for what is there to come. But we will also be able to address some of those questions in the Q&A. But for now, I'm also happy to give the floor over to Andrew Martin, Vice President of Membership and Stakeholder Engagement at the SAC, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, to give us some remarks on gaps and opportunities from your perspective. Please, Andrew, the floor is yours.
Super, thank you very much, Jonas, and thanks for inviting the Sustainable Apparel Coalition to be part of this important conversation. I want to talk to you about what we're doing and also why regulation can, and we believe should, play a key role in helping to activate the Fashion CEO agenda priorities, which already provides, I think, for us a clear focus in helping to reach our ambitious goal of transforming the fashion industry. So what have we been doing at the SEC, and why do we think regulation is important? Well, firstly, I think the pandemic highlighted global systemic problems in our industry, and we all need to work together, including policymakers, if we're going to solve this in a meaningful way. The pandemic also has given us an opportunity to rebuild better. The Fashion CEO agenda identifies crucial priorities as a path forward, and including this area of respectful and secure working environments we're discussing now. So for the SAC, for the past 10 years, we've been developing the Higg Index tools to measure social and environmental performance, working in multi-stakeholder partnership with our members with external verifiers to check assessments and make sure data is credible and can be communicated in a standardized way. We're also working closely with various ecosystem partners to maximize resources and minimize duplicative efforts. And in this particular context of the focus for this panel, we played a crucial role in setting up the SLCP, Social Labour Convergence Programme, to drive impact specifically in these areas. And I think Janet outlined extremely succinctly and passionately why this is so important. But we all need more help, collaborating with policymakers and ensuring they have robust, verified data and insights that allow us to focus on the right priorities and further activate the industry through alignment and implementation is critical. So already without being mandated, I want to pick up on the fact that business and organizations like the OECD and the UN Guiding Principles who have already done what's incredible work to provide effective frameworks to tackle significant issues. There are also already credible practical tools, such as the Higg Index and existing industry programs that have proven to be effective, though we can all acknowledge we could go further and deliver even more. And with that in mind, as a voluntary initiative, the principle of mandating is also becoming increasingly relevant and important to us at the SAC. We've just now launched our new membership requirements for members to follow and adhere to. And a good example of this is the requirement for all brands and retailers to complete the Higg BRM, brand and retail module, which has already been developed in line with the OECD due diligence guidelines, or to adopt the Higg FSLM based on the SLCB Converge framework to capture social and labour data. However, I think the key point for this is, in order to achieve the exponential impact in line with the new vision for the industry, we really need to add good policy to the mix, to reinforce, to support, and actually to accelerate this. So what does good look like? So I'd like to start with alignment. As I mentioned earlier, there's an existing body of credible work. We really shouldn't be reinventing the wheel. Good policy needs to build on these existing initiatives so we don't create duplicity and add unnecessary burdens on actors in the global value chain. Further to this, I'd even boldly say that it's not even just a good idea, but it's actually essential that regulation builds on what has already been done to accelerate the action that we need to see in the next decade. The OECD and UNGP I've mentioned have been creating frameworks for years now. In the case of the SAC, we spent 10 years together with the industry, developing effective tools. Legislation that does not build on these but goes off at tangents severely risks setting the industry back by a decade, and we cannot afford that at this point. Finally, I want to say language is critical. We need unambiguous words and clear definitions. Just as the SAC spent the past decade developing tools for the standardized measurement of social and environmental impacts, so we can compare apples to apples, policy needs to be written so that it means what it means to you. Well-informed, well-structured policy can help the industry comply quickly and accurately, which is one of the reasons we also set up the Policy Hub, together with GFA, FESI, and has now been joined by Textile Exchange and ZDHC, to enable the industry to speak with one voice as it informs the development of regulation. So for our industry to be successful in solving these systemic problems, fulfilling the ambitious goals, and creating more respectful and secure work environments along the value chain, we have to do this together. And that means everyone, working in unison, aligned around common data, insights, priorities, tools, and programs that will help us achieve these goals. So to conclude, I think from the SAC's perspective, we support ambitious, smart legislation because it will help us align around clear and common standards to create a consumer goods industry that gives more than it takes to the people and planet. The Fashion CEO agenda identifies respectful and secure work environments as one of the 5 crucial priorities for accomplishing this goal, and policy can help further activate this and the other priorities through alignment and implementation. So thanks again, Jonas, for inviting the SAC to be here today. I hope everyone will join us in the collective action as we try and create a more sustainable, equitable world for all. Thanks.
Amazing. Thanks, Andrew. So I just want to remind everyone that we have the Q&A open, and thanks already. I can see a couple of questions popping in there, and I just want to make sure also that our panelists are able to follow. So both on the chat you can see is ongoing, but also the Q&A where there's a couple of questions in there already. One popping in for Lucretia. We'll get back to that, but please also have a look at the Q&A, because you can actually, as a viewer, as a participant, you can also which questions that you would love to hear more about. So please navigate on the right side of the screen. Now I'd love to turn over to Claus Peterson. Claus Peterson is a senior human rights specialist with Bestseller, and to hear your perspective, Claus, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jonas. And thank you very much for this opportunity to share Bestseller's perspective on policy gaps and opportunities. I want to start by telling you that I listened in at the CEO agenda launch last week. And during the ESG discussion, I could hear the panelists again and again telling us the story that the E part, E as an environment, was taking the pole position, while S as social and G as governance was lagging behind. We see that the sustainability discourses being somewhat skewed towards environmental parts, but we also believe we need a full circle approach when we work with this, so addressing the E, the C, the S, and the G in a balanced manner. And we are really pleased to see that the CEO agenda is actually taking up especially the E and the S in a good way. So thank you for that, and we look forward to engage more with the CEO agenda. Personally, I'm relatively new to the industry. I came from jewelry, but making that shift, I've been really astonished to see just how many issue-specific initiatives that we have within this industry. And the way I look at it, I believe that there's a chance that with the many initiatives that we lose oversight and consistency in what we're doing. So that puts me very well in line with Bestseller, that is coming to the conclusion that we need consolidation and alignment in all the different initiatives that we have. And we would say that when we are talking policy gaps and opportunity, there's also a need for more harmonization, consolidation within regulation. By now, mainly European countries has issued vast numbers of due diligence and reporting requirements on their businesses in order to secure a more inclusive supply chain. And we believe that these many different well-meant regulative efforts are a bit suboptimal, since they are all building on the OECD and UN guidance. So we believe there's a need, but there's also a business case for one common legislative framework. And we believe that there is a need to have one rule book who rules them all. And that's where we are, of course, hoping for EU's new mandatory due diligence legislation to take up that role as the authority rule book. If we forge it in the right way, and I think, Andre, you gave some really good ideas on how this could be done and what it should, what should be in it. But if we do it in the right way, there will be a consolidation and alignment of all the country-based legislation so far. It can help us create a level playing field, and it can inspire and even force laggards to start moving within the sustainability field. It will also, if we have one common rule book, help us to facilitate the long-term investments that we need to have in the industry in order to get where we need to go. It will provide us with common expectation and a common language for our dealings. And it will be able to easier expose green and blue washing activities from the company level. So we are really welcoming this new initiative, Lucretia. So I'm really hoping that you are doing your homework well. I know that there's a lot of wishful thinking in what I'm saying, but the alternative, which is just more industry initiatives on specific issues, more country specific legislation, that's not something that we should wish for. But of course, Lucretia, what is important from our side is that you need to really involve companies and other stakeholders when you are doing the practical implementation of the upcoming mandatory due diligence. You really need to have the dialogue with us, more than answering questionnaires, but really go into a good dialogue with us. And then again, when the when the legislation is there, we as companies, as CEOs, should expect and demand assistance from the EU in order to live up to the requirements that we will have in the new legislation. So we need your help to help us enforce these rules in our supply chains, also in the very difficult context that we can see in the world today. So we are really looking forward to have a lot of collaboration with you. And I think that will be my final remark.
So much, Claus. I think while we're just waiting for someone to join, Simon Platz from ASAS, maybe Lucretia, that actually that's something that demands a reply from you. I think Claus was inviting for some collaboration. So any particular inputs from you, Lucretia, specifically on Claus's points?
Sure, just to say on our side, we are of course open to dialogue with the companies and the stakeholders, and we welcome every input that comes. Already now in the preparation stage of our proposal, so happy to discuss with all of you and take your input into account, and your experience is very valuable. The idea is also to build up on what companies have done in the past. We are aware of the best practices and good practices of some companies. The reason why we decided to move towards a mandatory scheme is, on the one hand, the fact that we need a critical mass. So whilst there are a lot of companies doing that, if we want to have really an important impact, we need to have everybody on board. But the idea to have everybody on board is not against not taking into account all the good efforts and all the good work that has been done so far. So it's of course welcome on our side, the input and the feedback that can come. And then also, this is in the first stage. Then, as you know, once the Commission puts forward the proposal, there will be discussions among co-legislators before the adoption. After the adoption, we can think of further guidance and guidelines to be adopted and to be eventually discussed with the companies to facilitate also the implementation of the final proposal. So for us, we see it really as an iterative process, and we are open to have input and advice.
Thanks, Patricia. And Simon is now with us, and I would love to turn over to you, Simon, to give us your perspectives on policy gaps and opportunities within the field. And just before I hand you the floor, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that Simon is, of course, the responsible sourcing director at ASAS. So also very familiar with all of these issues, obviously, that we're talking about here. You probably missed some of the discussion, but just stick to your speaking points, and we'll take you through it. So please, the floor is yours, and you need to unmute. We can't hear you. There's an element at the very end bottom of the screen. So while we are solving, of course, those technical issues, please, Simon, just jump in when you can. We can't hear you at this stage either. So we'll just jump to a couple of questions from the audience, and I saw that there was actually another one from for you, Lucretia. Specifically the one from Sarah Ditti at Fashion Revolution. Just a question there with whether you can provide any further insights about whether the forthcoming mandatory due diligence proposal might explicitly address wages for workers in the supply chain. So over to you, Lucretia, and just wanted to see if you can touch upon that.
So we are. I don't know if you hear me.
Yeah, we hear you. We have definitely some sound issues, but I think we hear you now. Yes.
Hear me?
Yes, we do. We hear you. Please go ahead.
So I was saying we are now preparing the initiative. We are asking ourselves many questions, among which also the kind of risks that we want to tackle. And these are some of the risks. We are looking into that. And more generally, what I can say is that we are looking at the commitments and the provisions that are contained in international conventions, like the ILO conventions and also human rights conventions, to see what kind of risks we should tackle, and we should identify and include in these initiatives as the ones that will be addressed by the due diligence initiative.
Thank you. I hope everybody hears me also now. I think there's a question for Claus also in the Q&A. You might have seen it already, Claus, but do you think that the Responsible Jewelry Council standards around supplier certifications, tracking and audit would be a good template for governance alignment and to a common rule book? So it definitely seems that, there we go, please.
I'm here. I'll write the last word because I actually
audio video.
Okay, we'll get to you, Simon, in a moment. Thanks. Please continue.
Okay. Actually, we hear you. Simon, do you want to take the floor?
Sorry, Claus. Shall I take the floor while it's working?
All right. Well, we'll just hear from Claus in response to the question, and then we'll hand over to you, Simon.
No problem. Sorry, guys.
Okay, so the question that was posed to me by Maria, which is actually an old colleague of mine, is whether a setup like the one that rules I would say the jewelry industry, the Responsible Jewelry Council, would be applicable to our industry. And I say yes, with modifications, absolutely. What I think has succeeded in that industry is to have all the larger brands, but also more than 1,000 small, medium-sized enterprises signing up for the same standards, certifications, advocacy work, etc., within one organization. So there's really more harmonization in that industry, in what I experienced coming in five months in your fantastic industry, our fantastic industry. So I don't have vast experience here, but I could see it working for that specific industry. And I really believe that the consolidation and the harmonization and everybody referring to the same legislative framework is key for us to succeed going forward.
Amazing. Thank you, Claus. And let's just everybody cross their fingers that we can now hear Simon that with us all the way from the UK. I know there's lots of borders and so on to get through, but I think we can hear you, Simon. So please.
Conspiracy, definitely. Okay, thank you and apologies, everyone. So I was going to talk to the point of some of the work that we've been doing here at ASOS, and I wanted to talk about the why, the what, and the how. So at ASOS, Fashion with Integrity, our Fashion with Integrity program underpins all that we do within our business operations, and it's how we work to ensure that we minimize the impact on the planet while enhancing the lives of the people that we work with and that operate within our business. We view it's our responsibility to make sure that every worker in the supply chain is respected and protected. Our ethical trade strategy sets out the vision for empowering the workers to protect their rights and improve their working conditions. So what do we do with this? Well, as part of that, we work to find longer-term solutions to address the key human rights issues that challenge us and that challenge our garment supply chain. And we do that with meaningful collaboration. We work with NGOs, we work with the trade unions, and we work with our other third-party brand partners. So as I'm sure many of you know, ASOS is not just about the ASOS brands, but we sell many other third-party brand partners. We also do this through specific engagement with governments. on policies and legislations, and that's why it's great to be here today to talk about this. So although ASOS is a global business, I just wanted to touch on something that's quite close to home, specifically to me living in Leicestershire in the UK, where that is where a lot of the UK manufacturing takes place. We're a very proud UK business, particularly proud about what happened in 2015 when the UK took the lead on global modern slavery legislation and introduced the Modern Slavery Statement Act. So for the first time, it required large companies in the UK to report on what they were doing to combat the issues around modern slavery. We've also been pleased to see how other countries have adopted this and implemented it and have actually learned from some of the gaps that we've had within the UK modern slavery statements. So we've been an active supporter of this Modern Slavery Act now for over 5 years, and we've just recently published our 5th Modern Slavery Statement. However, there are still shortcomings, and within the Act there are serious issues that again have been highlighted over the past 12 to 18 months in the UK that surround the working environments, wages and modern slavery issues of manufacturing in the UK. Now, we first implemented a mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence legislation in the UK a while ago, and we publicly supported that introduction of the policy into the Modern Slavery Statement. And we've asked that the government will consider that in their new legislative framework so that that enhances, if you like, a move on from the Modern Slavery Act. And we're very supportive of a similar approach within the EU. The second thing we did was introducing a licensing scheme, and we've been pushing with the government to introduce a licensing scheme for production in the UK to support ethically the employers and the businesses and create a level playing field so that those who don't follow the rules will be found out and those that do follow the rules will gain better business. And you know, as a business that wants to support UK manufacturing, we think this is essential and an essential part of what's now needed in legislation. It's something that we put forward alongside the British Retail Consortium, and we're hoping now that the government will consider that and address that specific problem to UK manufacturing. The third and final step was about stronger enforcement powers. And when a factory or supplier is found to be non-compliant or not operating properly, there is something that the government can do and that they can pledge to introduce, and we would urge them to introduce some regulation and some better legislation to ensure better performance and moving away from the unethical practices that can just carry on with no repercussion. So beyond those steps, we think that international collaboration on the key issues between organisations, government, brands, business is vital to deliver the real change. And it's why we're really proud to be part of the GFA and the work that we're doing here. We think that if we can use the examples that we've had or experiences that we've seen and use that throughout the world, we're going to drive better change and we're going to drive it quicker and bigger. So thank you very much. That was all I was going to say, Jonas.
Thank you, Simon. So we started a little bit late here, and there's so many questions coming in, both actually in the chat and in the Q&A. Please use the Q&A for it, also for sessions later in the day. But I just want to turn to Andrew and Janet to see if there are any. I mean, hopefully you've been following a little bit the questions also, because I can see there's actually a couple that mentions you, Andrew, and I just want to make sure that you are aware that there are questions, and also please feel free to stay within this session. For those of you who can, to also bring in answers directly in the chat. I can see, Janet, you've already done that. That's amazing. But Andrew, maybe may I just hand over to you?
Yeah, sure. There's a couple of questions I want to pick up on that allude to, I think, I'm trying to see where they're from. They're all anonymous. that they kind of allude to and then talk about transparency and claims. And I think that's a really important area as well that's being addressed. I think when we talked before, and I think Janet and I talked a lot about the kind of data that's being collected and the alignment and the convergence on that. I think the next step is then transparently, how are we now starting to share that? And I think from an organizational perspective, it's a goal and it's a track of work for the SAC at the moment, is enabling ways of sharing that data in a transparent way. From the policy perspective, I think there's, and this is where making sure the alignment on different policy initiatives going on in the EU is important, is upcoming work around the empowering consumers and substantiating green claims, and actually ensuring that that data that's being collected, that there are means and ways of it to be communicated to consumers in a meaningful way and a way that is then also accessible. And that's something that we're working on. There's going to be a lot more coming up very soon, but I think there's 2 or 3 other questions really talk around this issue of transparency. And I think that links strongly to data and some of the different initiatives from a policy point of view in the EU.
Amazing. Thanks, Andrew. And I can actually see we're actually eating a little bit of the break here that we were supposed to have, but we started a little bit late. I think, Lucretia, if you were to be given the last word for within like 1.5 minutes or short answer, there's a basic question from you. At least that's what Michael Schrecker has posted in the Q&A. What does success look like? What specifically do you hope will be different in industry when these new policies are enacted? Have you developed KPIs to guide the policy? So I know a lot of questions, but just 1 minute. So please, hope we can hear you.
So on our side, the success would be that we are able to meet our commitments, I was saying, as a union, when it comes to social rights, human rights, and our environmental commitments. This means that we would not be that the risks that we hear now of forced labor or unsafe working conditions and etc. would be tackled. We are working on the methodology to make sure that the success could be quantified in this respect. But I have to say that that first and foremost, what guides the legislation is the fact that we want to use as I said since the beginning, our leverage as a society, as a European society, to be sure that we can achieve these goals. And this is first also more than there will be a quantitative evidence in it, but it's first and foremost a qualitative effort also on our side as a society.
Amazing. Thank you, Lucretia, for those insights. And we are running out of time here. So please, everyone listening in, give a warm applause to all the panelists. Thank you so much for joining us here. Please, for those of you who will join the next session on better wage systems, go to the sessions on the left of the screen and join the next session on better wages. So thank you so much, everyone. Goodbye for now.
Bye. Well done, Jonas.